going, guys? So it's hard to believe tomorrow the PlayStation 4 comes out and it'll start up the 8th generation of video games. So I thought I might as well take a look back at my top 10 favorite games of the current generation. I guess what future people will know after today as the 7th generation of video games. And so, I mean, these games look really great today, but I can imagine in 2 or 3 years these things are going to start looking pretty dated. I mean, PS2 looks old as hell nowadays. So anyways, I'm going to count down my top 10 favorite games of the 7th generation. I didn't have a PS3 for this generation, at least most of it. I only had it for Last of Us this year, so unfortunately there really won't be any PS3 games on here, and I'll pretty much just keep it to Xbox, except for one that came out on PC and Xbox, and you'll see it later. Anyways, here's the list. Enjoy. Number 10, Unreal Tournament 3. Back in the early 2000s, when everyone was playing Halo or Counter-Strike, me and my friends were having LAN parties every week and playing Unreal 2003 and 2004. This series has kept my attention ever since. Unreal Tournament 3 was the sequel to Unreal 2004 and brought the series into the current generation. Unreal started as a futuristic first-person shooter series, however with 2004 it made a major leap by adding vehicles to the game. The game takes vehicles even further, keeping the originals and adding some new ones. Some of the levels from UT 2004 made a comeback in this game, which is pretty awesome. There's plenty of game modes in Unreal Tournament 3, but the one you're going to want to play is Warfare, since it's the one that has the vehicles. Warfare also has the largest maps in the game, and has you taking over nodes that you have to connect to get to your enemy core and then destroy it. It's almost like a MOBA in how it works. Unreal Tournament 3 was a really rad first-person shooter that was plagued with the problem of no one ever playing it online. So far too often you're stuck just playing the AI. This is probably one of the only reasons this game isn't as good as it could have been. Overall, Unreal Tournament 3 is a really good game that no one ever plays. I'd recommend checking it out, but be prepared to play against the AI a lot. Number 9, Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead was a unique first-person shooter that had some interesting random elements to it. The game had 4 different 5-chapter scenarios, each with their own independent plots from each other. Each time you would play through each level of the game, it would completely randomly generate where the zombies would spawn. Generally, it never really seems that different between playthroughs, so despite it having random spawns, it can still feel quite repetitive. Aside from the massive hordes of zombies that you'll constantly be fighting, there's also 4 types of boss zombies. Each types of boss zombies have their own nuances and they're deadly each in their own way. Left 4 Dead shines with multiplayer, allowing each player to take the role of one of the 4 survivors. In Versus mode, 4 players can play the game as the 4 boss zombies. By having players play as the boss zombies, they can work together and plan attacks and single out survivors in order to stop the survivors from reaching the end of the level. Left 4 Dead was amazing when it first came out, and seeing the sheer amount of zombies the game threw at you was pretty astounding. While the game was billed as a little bit more random than it was, the game was still enjoyable and even better with friends. Number 8, Grand Theft Auto 4. Grand Theft Auto 4 was my first game for the Xbox 360, and it really sold me on getting a next-gen console. Having enjoyed all the previous entries since the original, this game was a massive leap in terms of gameplay from the previous experiences. I'll admit that Nico's plot wasn't exactly the most interesting in the GTA series. You're a Russian immigrant that's attempting to make money. It's not that great, but it doesn't have to be. It's pretty easy to say that Vice City is leaps and bounds ahead of GTA 4 in terms of plot. But with this game, raising chaos in the city has never been so much fun. One of my favorite additions is the ability to jump out of a moving vehicle. In the previous generation, if you hit the button to exit the car, you couldn't get out until the car stopped. They also made huge improvements to the physics, which made it so cars didn't roll just from making a right turn. Little details like this and the transition of the series into next gen made it feel so much better and so much more immersive. Grand Theft Auto 4's leap to the current generation was done amazingly well, and the game stands out in the generation as being one of the most enjoyable experiences to be had. With such a long gap between this game and GTA 5, this game really stands out as the most notable sandbox game of the entire generation. Number 7, Borderlands. What happens when you cross Diablo with a first-person shooter? You get Borderlands, that's what. Borderlands takes the random style loot from games like Diablo and puts them into a first-person shooter. The random loot comes to you in the form of guns. When this game was released, it had more guns than any other game ever released, but the record was soon to be broken by its sequel, Borderlands 2. This game combined RPG elements with a first-person shooter in such an amazing way. The way the plot's presented and the general attitude of the game is done in a great way. Right from the game's intro, it grabbed me and I couldn't set the game down for weeks. The 4 playable characters are vastly different, each having their own special abilities and skill trees. Each of the characters also specializes in a certain type of weapon, however, you don't have to stick to this if you don't want to. The decision to use cell shading on this game makes the game look super unique and fantastic. If an RPG-style first-person shooter sounds at all appealing to you, then this game is a must-play. I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't played it already. Number 6. Dead Island. If you took the Borderlands formula and added zombies on an island, you'd end up with Dead Island. Dead Island can be described as an open-world first-person zombie RPG. The game's plot has you waking up after a night of drinking and there was a zombie outbreak while you were asleep. After that, you spend the rest of the game attempting to get off the island. While there aren't a billion different weapons like in Borderlands, there are quite a few in this game. Most of the gameplay is focused on melee rather than ranged attacks with guns. There's also a huge crafting system where you can upgrade your weapons. The game also had a heavy focus on multiplayer, just like Borderlands, and it allows 4 people to play co-op against the zombies. It's possible to play the game solo, but it's much more fun with friends. The environments in this game are great to explore, all the island scenery is great, and the game only has a few drab environments. There are 2 major issues with this game that are worth noting, however. The first is that the controls feel stiff, and when you're getting assaulted with a huge wave of zombies, it can be really frustrating. The other issue with this game is the city of Mosley. This part of the game really opens up, but it gives you too many side quests to do here, often keeping players in the same area for far too long. I know many people that quit the game just because they got burnt out at this part of the game. My memories of Dead Island are mostly positive, and I really enjoyed the time I spent playing the game despite its minor flaws. Dead Island is a lot of fun, and if you missed it, it's worth checking out. Number 5. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, in my opinion, was the best of the Call of Duty games released in this generation. It was the sole Call of Duty game developed by Sledgehammer Games. Now, I know a lot of people argue that the Call of Duty games are all the same, but they do modify the nuances and class building in each game. Is it worth the full price each year? Maybe not. But it's my favorite first-person shooter series currently, and with how much I play each of these games, it's usually worth it for me. The class building in multiplayer was my favorite in this game because it had a really good set of weapons and a good way of leveling them. I always preferred the games that didn't have currency that you had to spend on upgrades and instead you unlocked things based on leveling up. I primarily play multiplayer in Call of Duty games, and I think this one was the best. This was the first Call of Duty to add the support kill streaks, which allowed you to focus on getting a high score rather than as many kills as you can. By focusing on a higher score, usually you'll end up helping your team more than the guy just sitting in the corner trying to farm an assault kill streak. Modern Warfare 3 introduced the game mode of Kill Confirmed. It's basically team deathmatch, but when you kill somebody they drop a dog tag, and those are needed to score points to actually win the game. This mode was great because it drastically reduced the annoying snipers that were prevalent in team deathmatch style modes before. In terms of single player, this game is pretty forgettable. If you're looking for a good single player Call of Duty game, look at the Black Ops series. Modern Warfare 3 was one of my favorite multiplayer games of the current generation. Say what you will about the Call of Duty series, but I found the multiplayer on this one to be a huge time sink that I thoroughly enjoyed. Number 4. Forza Horizon. Forza Horizon is one of my favorite games of all time. This game takes the Forza formula and applies it to an open world, and this ended up having wonderful results. The premise is that there's a music/racing festival in Colorado, and it's your job to rise to the top and get to number 1. The game plays wonderfully because it uses the sim physics and handling from Forza 4, however the ability to drive off track makes this game really a treat. It also is the first Forza game that ever really featured a plot. Graphically, this game is stunning, and living in Colorado, there's several landmarks in the game that actually look like places I recognize around the state. This was one of the reasons I was skeptical about buying this game at first. If I really wanted to drive around Colorado, I could just leave my house and hop in my car. I ended up playing it at a friend's house and loved it, so I picked it up that very same day. There are a few gripes I have with this game, though. This game has far less cars than Forza 4, and it also removes some of the tuning options that were in the previous 2 games. And the biggest gripe overall is how they handled the DLC for this game. This game was shipped with Day 1 DLC and a season pass that was super expensive but gave you more cars.
They also later released a mode called the 1000 Club that added extra things you could do and complete on each race. However, you couldn't get most of the achievements in the 1000 Club pack unless you bought every single DLC car in the game. Despite its few issues, it shapes up to be one of the most memorable experiences of the generation. I highly recommend Forza Horizon to anyone who is a fan of the racing genre.
Number 3. Half-Life 2.
Half-Life 2 ushered in the current generation in late 2004. I remember the night clearly when it came out. My computer couldn't run it, so I went to a friend's house that had it pre-installed, and we stayed up all night just diving super deep into that game. I think we covered almost half the game in just one sitting that night. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had watching someone else play through a game. The game may have came out a year before the current generation of consoles did, but the graphics and gameplay on this one ushered in the new era on the PC like no other game could. Half-Life 2 not only introduced modern graphics to the game, it also created one of the most fantastic physics engines ever seen at the time. Adding to the amazing physics, the game featured the gravity gun. This gun allowed you to pick up almost anything, anywhere, and use it as a weapon. It also allowed you to blast doors open and was used in some puzzles. The game adds tons to the already epic plot that the original Half-Life 2 started. It does this by expanding on old characters, adding new ones, and having you explore a world much more massive than just Black Mesa. The plot has great depth exploring the world and seeing the Combine's oppression against the human race. It all just makes you want to keep playing and defeat the Combine. The game hits a few snags with a few puzzles that aren't quite clear, however, usually you can figure them out with a little bit of exploring and trial and error. Half-Life 2 also gave us Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, which is only available on the PC. This multiplayer mode was one of the most hectic and fun modes I've ever played, in its heyday. Today the multiplayer is only a shell of what it used to be, being littered with far too many boring, empty custom maps. Half-Life 2 also introduced the Source engine, which spawned a multitude of games based on the engine, like Left 4 Dead, The Stanley Parable, and Team Fortress 2. The Source engine also modernized Counter-Strike and brought the game from version 1.6 to Source, which features a massively improved graphics and gameplay from the original. Half-Life 2 set an amazing standard that ushered in the 7th generation of video games. The game itself is amazing, and the gravity gun is one of the coolest weapons of any game ever. This game, without a doubt, is a must-play.
Number 2. Red Dead Redemption.
Grand Theft Horse, also known as Red Dead Redemption, is a sandbox game set in the Wild West from the makers of GTA. I really like the Red Dead series because there really isn't enough video games set in an Old West setting. The game's gameplay feels a lot like Grand Theft Auto in terms of the controls, which isn't too surprising because the same developers made both of them. There really are some great touches to this game that make the world feel alive. When riding around the world, you'll run into other stagecoaches and people on the side of the road that are in trouble and need help. The plot is great too. The government takes your family and you have to do tasks for them to get them back. This usually means taking out various outlaw gangs. The majority of the quests in this game are a lot of fun and they never really feel too repetitive. The environments in this game are extremely well done and they did a really good job of representing the American Southwest. Most of the area in this game looks like Arizona and northern Mexico, but Colorado and Missouri are also represented. This game is amazing by itself, but they also put out the Undead Nightmare DLC that was a really strange turn for the game, but really enjoyable. One of my favorite features of the DLC was the 4 horses of the apocalypse that you're able to tame and ride. They can run forever and are extremely fast compared to all the other horses in the game. They also set fire to anything you run over. Red Dead Redemption was fantastic. I thought it was one of the coolest games of the generation, and I would highly recommend checking it out.
And number 1. Fallout 3.
Fallout 3 is my favorite Western RPG of all time. The game is just so deep and there's so much to do, see, and explore. This is the only game on the 360 I actually 100%ed in terms of achievements. In my opinion, this was the best game of the entire generation. The plot takes place in a nuclear wasteland about 100 years after the world ended during World War III. You emerge from a fallout shelter that you were born in into a harsh wasteland that was once Washington, D.C. The plot is amazing and it draws you in right from the start. The game has an amazing style to it. The entire game is imagined from a 1950s view of the future. The music in this game and the debris and the robots you'll find all reflect this. The game is loaded with music from pre-World War II America and it adds to the incredible amount of atmosphere found in this game. The game gives you plenty of options on how you want to build your character by letting you assign 10 ability points and choosing one perk per level. The perk will usually vastly affect the game, especially in combat, by adding some unique modifiers. You also have the option of being good, evil, or neutral based on your behavior in the game. The combat feels pretty good for being a strange version of a first-person shooter. One of my favorite things about Fallout 3 is the VATS mode that you can go into while in combat. This allows you to lock onto certain parts of an enemy, and with the Bloody Mess perk, by shooting an enemy in the head, you can make their entire body explode in a mist of gore. The game addresses many themes in post-apocalyptic America, like social class, slavery, and often showing the horrific nature of humans when put into such dire circumstances. Fallout 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, and it really hits the mark in every way possible. I think I can easily say this game is my favorite of the last generation, and I've dumped more than 300 hours into this game, playing in every way possible. This game is absolutely worth playing if you haven't tried it.
Anything goes. The world has gone mad today, and good's bad today, and black's white today, and day's night today, and that gent today you gave a cent today once had several chateaus.
And that was my top 10 favorite games of the current generation, the 7th generation as it'll be known pretty soon. Hopefully you enjoyed that list. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, thumbs it up, why not? Anyways, have a good one, guys.